country. So my name is Jeff Edmondson. I was the founding director of a partnership that is similar to Commit in Cincinnati in northern Kentucky. I say similar very intentionally because how many folks in here have been to the Cincinnati area? Show of hands. Okay, great. So actually quite a few folks. For those folks that have been there, I think that they would agree that Cincinnati is very different than Dallas. It is not the same at all. As a matter of fact, there are some similarities that I think there are similar aspirations for the community. There are similar outcomes that everybody wants to move, but the context is incredibly different, right? It's much smaller in geography. Certainly the demographics are different, and the amount of resources that are available is also different, right? We don't have all of you in Cincinnati. And so what we were able to learn, though, is a bunch of lessons about how a community could begin to answer some of these questions that you raised, right? How could we help to effectively facilitate this work? How could we identify the right outcomes that everybody rallies around? How could we get even the families engaged? And what we've seen in our region, not solely because of the partnership, and we're very careful to say that, what we have seen in our region is a consistent improvement in more and more outcomes every year. And that improvement has not come from a ton of new resources. As a matter of fact, we've only started one brand new program since the partnership was launched in 2006, right? Now, there's been things that have gone on in Cincinnati separate from the partnership, but the partnership itself has stayed focused on how do we move these dials, and then how do we work with the existing partners in the community to help figure out how to move those dials together, right? So let's look at the data in Dallas, for example, and what is already moving the dial, and let's figure out how more folks could get rallied around that, right? That's the heart of this collective impact concept. Because I think we have this idea in the social sector that there is, I hate to even use this term anymore, some silver bullet out there that is just going to be the cure-all. There is not, right? The cure-all is going to be everybody in this room actually looking at the data together, figuring out what works, and getting to work on it, right? So that's the heart of what we've been able to do. And from that, we have learned a ton of lessons. I can tell you more about the things that have kept me up at night, the mistakes we've made, than I can tell you about the good stuff we've done. Because quite frankly, this is very, as Jonathan said, very, very messy work. This is very difficult work. It is not something that you can just figure out overnight. It's going to take years to get right. But fortunately, I think you have the leadership in Dallas that'll stick with it. And hopefully all of you together as leaders will stick with it. So even when there are mistakes made, we can figure out how to forge forward. So the heart of this work, the ultimate impact, as I just mentioned, is that if you have a certain amount of money right now in the system, and I know Dallas has an incredible just array of resources to work with, that if you have that existing resources right now, the focus of this is not so much how do we get new stuff, but how do we get a better social return on investment with what we have, right? How do we actually identify those practices that get work, to get that better return? And I feel very confident at this point that all across the country there are different communities trying to take this on, getting through the messiness, and they are beginning to attract new resources, right? Because people are starting to see that these communities really care about data, and they're really organized around getting better impact. So in Cincinnati, we got a Social Innovation Fund grant. Seattle just got one of the largest Race to the Top grants, and they have a partnership that's very advanced. So we're starting to see people attracting new resources, but the mindset and the mentality up front is really about those 11 outcomes that you picked in Dallas. How can collectively everybody work together to actually make sure that those are really moving in the right direction? So just very quickly, a slide that goes, it's very consistent with the exercise that Jonathan did at the beginning. But this helped us in our community. It was actually the head of the United Way that kind of helped figure this out with all the different partners in the community. He said if we were at isolated impact initially, where we actually have, that didn't work. Wow. That's so sad. It's such a cool slide with the innovation. I feel really down right now. But hopefully, yeah, thank you. See this? Hang in there. Thank you. That's collective impact right there. Just stick with it. We're going to get through this together. It's going to be wonderful. But the idea being is that if at the bottom we're kind of all over the place, isolated impact, in the middle we may actually through collaboration, right? And a lot of people talk about collaboration over the years, where people came together and they talked to each other, right? But they pretty much end up doing pretty much the same thing, but they're at least coordinated. If that's kind of the middle, we're actually trying to get to this common game plan that Ashley outlined so well, I thought, around third grade reading. Obviously there's questions and obviously there's difficulties. But the real difference here between collaboration and collective impact is that we are getting to a common game plan. But I thought I'd just share this really quick, because we get a lot of questions across the country about, haven't we already tried this before? This has already been done. I know in Dallas there's been several initiatives to try to pull a broad array of cross-sector partners together. And one question that we always get asked is, how would this differ? How would collective impact differ from those efforts that we may have tried in the past, right? So we've sort of boiled it down to 4 things, and I'm sure there's other things. As you experience this, you'll say, wow, this is a lot different. But the first would be is that in collaboration, where you often come together around a program, often it's an RFP. Can folks relate to that? Right? An RFP that came out that said, you guys got to work together, right? And that's how we all came together around that particular grant application. This work isn't coming together around a grant application. It's not coming together around money, right? It's coming together around the outcomes. To say that if we at the population level wanted to consistently see the green arrows on the scorecard that Todd provided you, if we want to consistently see those outcomes moving in the right direction, it's not going to be about new money. It's going to be about us working together initially to figure out what works, to get all those dials at the population level across all of Dallas County moving in the right direction. So that's one difference. It's not coming together around a program or a grant. It's coming together to say we have to all see those outcomes moving in the right direction, and we're going to rally around at least one of those. I'm an arm waver, so this is I'm doing everything I can to hold it in here. So I'm sorry if I'm fading in and out a little bit. The second one is proving versus improving. Is that data primarily right now is used to beat folks upside the head, right? Data is primarily used as a punitive tool. And so the whole idea that data could actually be used as a constructive tool is really scary, right? And I think it gets to underneath the funder question, right? If funders are going to use data to knock people down, rather than to help encourage people and lift people up, then we're going to be in trouble. And I think about the visual that Ashley shared with the plus sign and the minus sign. If you get a minus sign, it shouldn't mean that the spigot shuts off. What it should mean is that we're actually improving, right? We're going to learn from what happened, and we're going to get better. And so this idea, the second big difference between collaboration and collective impact is that you're using data not to prove things, but you're actually using data to improve things, right? And specifically improve how we serve children. The next piece is that collaboration is often in addition to what you do, rather than a part of what you do. And I worked at the largest public high school in Washington, D.C., and we had over 100 community partners that worked in the high school. And we would have a meeting every other week with our principal, and usually one of his agenda items was new collaborative opportunities. And when he would get to that agenda item, everybody in the room would immediately dive under the table, right? Because this was the new collaborative opportunity that we were all going to now have to be a part of, or at least one of us was. And it was going to become number 57 on our list of things to do, rather than something that really helped us out every single day, right? And the idea with this is that initially there are going to be some convenings, and Ashley's going to actually went through an example on third grade reading. There are going to be meetings that folks have to come to. But where we hope that these collaboratives can get is that every time you come to a meeting, you actually get data that helps you do what you do every single day better, right? You're actually being fed data that you would have never had access to. That might say, you know what, this seems to be working. This really is maybe not with this population. Maybe we need to begin to do things a little differently. And you can take that back and it become a part of what you do every day. Does that make sense? And this is critical. That's why this role that Commit is talking about of actually looking at the data, analyzing it, and feeding it back to you is incredibly important. It's not data to put in the newspaper. Right? I have a guy that's worked now in Cincinnati for 7 years. I actually handed off the work, so I shouldn't say I have the guy. I've got a colleague that's running the work in Cincinnati now. He's been there for 7 years. He has never published anything that went to the paper. What he does is give information to the networks of providers so that they can improve together. Does that make sense? And then the last piece is that you're, instead of just advocating for ideas, you're advocating for what works. Because you have that data, you as a network are able to go to the funders and say, listen, I think this is awesome. It worked in New York City, right? That may be what we did before. Right? Now you can go to funders together and say, look, we looked at the data. And right here in our own hometown, we know this works. This is something we quite simply have to do more of, because we're seeing results, right? We're seeing the positive. We're seeing the green arrows go up. And when you're able to put that data in front of people, it creates a different conversation. It's not an aspiration that you want to do something. It's actual evidence that you want to drive outcomes together in a different direction. So does this all make sense? Okay? So the hope is that by working together, by getting to this point, that you're not actually being beat upside the head by data, that you're actually going to be able to work collaboratively to get to better outcomes. So I just want to finish by saying that there's kind of 4 key thoughts that we've learned that if you take away nothing from today, from what I've said, there'd be 3 things. One is that data has to drive your focus. And this was petrifying to our community, and it has been petrifying to places all across the country, right? Because of the punitive nature of data. But we had this great moment where we were really getting pushback from folks about data. And it was the dean of the College of Education that stood up in a room very similar to this and just said, listen, I know people say that you can lie with data. But I know one thing for sure. You can lie a whole heck of a lot easier without it. Right? And so a key moment for us was to say that our data in the social sector is not perfect right now. Right? I'm sure that we could all have quibbles with even the 11 outcomes that were put up there. And I'm sure that we want to make them better. But what we have seen in our community is that once we put the data out there in a unified way, people started getting better data. So in our community, we had a literacy assessment for kindergarten. It was all about literacy. So a group formed to create an assessment for social emotional development. And now, next year, we're going to be able to launch for the first time an assessment around social emotional development of kindergartners. We're starting to get better at assessing because we're willing to put it out there. And our line around that was, don't let perfect be the enemy of good. Right? We think we have to have perfect data in order to use it at all. Let's just use what we've got right now and commit to getting better at using it together. Right? So that's the biggest point that I have, is just really make sure that you let the data drive. Start with the data you got, right? We've had networks that came together with 20 plus organizations. There were only 3 or 4 that actually had data that you could mine into. Start with that, right? It doesn't have to be that every single person right from the get-go has to have perfect data. You'll have a data analyst from Commit that'll help you figure out how to collect the data that doesn't cost $1 million to do, right? There are ways to collect data very efficiently and effectively, but just start with the data you got and then move forward. Once again, don't let perfect be the enemy of good. Next is dig deep. That we've had folks that look at the data and they think that they figured it all out, and then they break it down by subpopulations, right? By race, class, ethnicity, and they see a whole different picture emerge. Right? So dig deep. Don't just be satisfied with population level data. Dig deep to figure out what works with different types of populations in different geographies so you really understand the problem. And then, as best you can, resist the urge to jump into some sort of action. Right? So if you're a part of a network, the urge is going to be, let's just go do something together. Right? And as awesome as that may be, right, we don't really know if it works or not. And for years, we've jumped to action without really understanding what works. And I don't think we've seen the dial consistently move the way we want it to move. So the last thing would just be to say, if you could be patient, even though this is going to take some time, if you can actually take the time to look at the data and use that to drive your action, your very first action, because that'll set the precedent for everything else you do going forward together, make sure the data's behind it. Local data. Not data from New York or LA. Local Dallas data on what in this county gets results.